I want to talk to you about a word that lawyers use a lot and has a very different meaning for us than it does in common usage, even though it's a very common word. And that word is facts. We have a definition of the word facts that is inherent to the entire legal system and that we don't really explain to anybody else. And it's a little bit complicated, but it's really important to understand a lot of things about the law and logic and some other stuff. So I'm going to explain it to you now, or do my best. And even if you don't get it right now, as we go through some other things, I may send you back to watch this again. I don't know how many of you have seen My Cousin Vinnie, but I'm just going to give you a quick overview real fast. Okay, the important part of My Cousin Vinnie real fast. You got a convenience store. Our two guys, the two Ralph Macchio guy, pulls up in a 1964 metallic mint green Buick Skylark. They pull up to the store, they walk in, they buy a couple things, they leave. Boom, done. Then, a couple of minutes later, two other guys pull up in a 1963 Pontiac Tempest that is also metallic mint green. It's basically exactly the same color, and it looks almost exactly the same. They pull in, they go in, they rob the place, and leave. And that's where the confusion happens. Meanwhile, you got this witness who lives nearby. And she's standing there. She looks over just in time to see the metallic mint green 1964 Pontiac Skylark pull in. Look, it's a 1964 metallic mint green Pontiac Skylark. But then she looks away. So even though we know that the Pontiac Skylark leaves, she doesn't see that. She also doesn't see the 1963 metallic mint green Pontiac Tempest pull in. Boop, 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 boop. So she looks away for a second, and she sees the same car still sitting there. Two robbers come out, drive away. She doesn't even know they're different people because the cars look the same. So the whole plot of the movie is that our two good guys in the Buick Skylark get confused with the two bad guys in the other car and have to go to court to prove that they didn't commit the robbery. But when that witness in the little orange house is brought in, the witness has to explain what they saw. So what happens if the witness says, I saw those two boys pull up in that green car, get out, walk in, and then turn around a few minutes later, walk out, and drive away? And we know that the robbery occurred sometime in that time period. Is the witness lying or telling the truth? This is where we find a new word to be useful, because truth is not going to cut it here. But neither is lie. So lawyers need a word for those little pieces of the story that we cannot know objectively if they're really true or not, but without giving them any sort of value judgment, we can at least say whether we're going to accept them or not accept them for our set of events. And that word that we use is fact. To a lawyer, a fact is a tiny element of the story. It's not necessarily true or untrue, because as the example of the lady in the orange house showed, sometimes you can't tell what's really true and not true in a courtroom. Often it comes down to what somebody's perspective was when they saw the event. But over the course of a court case, we take all of these little elements and decide which ones are going to be accepted into our storyline of events and which ones are not. And of course, all of the facts lined up make a fact pattern. The decision whether or not to accept a particular event as a fact may come down to whether or not the person who said it was believable. Maybe it's somebody with really thick glasses who doesn't look like they can see very well. Maybe it's somebody who seems to have memory problems. But somebody is going to have to decide which of these facts are going to become part of our fact pattern and which ones are not. That person is known as the finder of fact. And in most court cases, the finder of fact is the jury. In a few cases where there is no jury, a judge will stand in as the finder of fact. And in the end, the finder of fact will lay out a list of events that occurred in that particular parking lot. And those events will be known as the fact pattern. It's really up to the finder of fact to decide what the facts were and what the fact pattern is. because only certain courts are allowed to find facts. Other courts are not. In most cases, higher courts, like a circuit court or Supreme Court, is not allowed to find new facts. Facts are found in the lowest level courts, in the district courts. And once a finding of fact is made by the finder of fact, once the jury decides that this is what happened, usually those decisions cannot be questioned. I know you've heard of appeals, but appeals are only about laws, not usually about facts. That's not always true, but it's often true. Now, in the case of my cousin Vinnie, the fact pattern was going to be that our heroes drove up in their metallic mint green car, went in and robbed the place, came back out, got back in their metallic mint green car, and left, because that's what the witnesses, or the story the witnesses were putting together. The finder of fact really had no choice but to put that story together. And in the story, Marissa Tomei flies in right at the end and saves the day. She notices that the tire pattern of the getaway car after the robbery didn't match what the tire pattern would have been on the boy's car, our hero's car. So there had to have been two cars. So that piece of information changes what the finder of fact decides at the end is going to be the fact pattern. Now, if you made it all the way to the end of this, which God bless you, I hope you understand that part of the reason I'm explaining this is that we're going to talk about courts of appeals and the Supreme Court, which are not allowed usually to deal with questions of fact. And I needed you to understand, really understand what a fact was before we could get there. I hope I have done an acceptable job. I may have to make this video again because it's a tough concept to explain, particularly because we all know what a fact is, right? We use the word all the time. But it is just a different definition. So hopefully this worked. Hopefully it's understandable. And from here, I will be able to go into some other explanations without re-explaining this over and over again. Thanks.